Hey guys! Today we're diving into the story of a ruler whose name still echoes through palaces and battlefields alike. A man who commanded three continents and built an empire that seemed invincible. You're not just hearing history, you're standing in the middle of it, feeling the dust under your boots, hearing the clash of swords, smelling the smoke rising from burning cities. And if you think ruling empires is glamorous, let me remind you, most kings didn't die peacefully in their sleep. They died poisoned, stabbed, or dragged from their thrones by angry mobs. You probably won't survive this journey either, but hey, at least you'll go out with one hell of a story. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is 1494. The place, Edirne, capital of the Ottoman Empire. A young prince named Selim stands at the edge of the palace gardens, his robes soaked in sweat and blood. His father, Sultan Bayezid II, rules a vast domain stretching from Anatolia to the Balkans. But power in the Ottoman court isn't inherited. It's seized. Brothers don't grow up playing together. They grow up plotting each other's deaths. Selim knows this all too well. He's already survived multiple assassination attempts, endured exile, and watched rivals fall. Some by steel, others by poison slipped into wine. You can feel the tension in the air as he prepares for the inevitable. There's no diplomacy here, no peaceful transition of power. To rule, he must kill or be killed. The palace corridors echo with whispers. Guards shift uneasily at their posts, and somewhere in the distance, a janissary commander sharpens his blade. Selim doesn't hesitate. He rides out at dawn, leading a force loyal only to him, determined to claim the throne before someone else does. This is the world you've stepped into, one where loyalty is fleeting, ambition is lethal, and survival demands ruthlessness. He reaches the capital first. His father, sensing the storm, abdicates and flees to Medina, leaving the city in chaos. Selim enters through gates smeared with the remnants of past betrayals. He orders the execution of his brothers, 6 in total, to eliminate any future threats. Some say he wept afterward. Others say he never blinked. Either way, the throne is his. The Ottoman Empire now belongs to a man forged in fire, hardened by betrayal, and ready to reshape the world. And you? You're right there beside him, watching as the curtain rises on one of history's most formidable rulers. You stand in the heart of Edirne, now under Selim's iron grip, but the city is far from settled. The palace halls are filled with wary eyes and whispered prayers. Some nobles bow deeply, their smiles tight and insincere. Others disappear into the night, fleeing to foreign courts or rebel strongholds. You feel the weight of a throne soaked in blood, not just from the executions, but from centuries of conquest and betrayal. Selim didn't inherit peace. He inherited a realm on the edge of collapse. The empire stretches from the Danube to the Euphrates, but unity is an illusion. In Anatolia, the powerful Safavid sect rises under Shah Ismail, preaching rebellion and promising holy war. In the Balkans, vassal rulers test the new sultan's resolve, sending subtle signals of defiance, delayed tribute payments, missing soldiers when summoned, border skirmishes that no one claims responsibility for. Even within the Janissary Corps, the elite military force that has long been the sultan's sword and shield, there's murmuring. They were loyal to his father, not necessarily to him. You walk through the council chambers where generals and viziers debate strategy behind closed doors. Some urge immediate action against the Safavids before their movement spreads, like wildfire. Others argue for consolidating power in Europe first, fearing that if Hungary or Venice sense weakness, they'll strike. Selim listens in silence, his fingers tapping against the armrest of his throne. He doesn't need advice, he needs results. Outside, the streets are restless. Merchants complain about rising taxes, imposed to fund the inevitable wars ahead. Religious scholars whisper that Selim's claim to the throne is cursed, that he slaughtered his own blood to sit there. You hear these rumors in the bazaars, see them scribbled on mosque walls in secret messages. But fear is already spreading faster than dissent. The new sultan isn't just ruthless, he's unpredictable. And unpredictability is its own kind of power. Within weeks, Selim makes his move. He departs Edirne, leading an army eastward toward Anatolia. You ride beside him, feeling the dust sting your skin as the banners of the Ottoman Empire snap in the wind. This isn't just a campaign, it's a statement. The rebels will kneel or burn. There's no middle ground. And you know, watching the determination in his eyes, that this is only the beginning. You ride with Selim's army as it cuts through the Anatolian plains. But this isn't just a campaign, it's a transformation. The Sultan doesn't just want to win battles. He wants an empire that obeys without question, an army that moves like a single, unbreakable force. And you're right there beside him, watching as he reshapes the Ottoman military from the inside out. The Janissaries were once the backbone of the empire, elite, disciplined, and fiercely loyal. But time has dulled their edge. Corruption seeps into their ranks. Some generals grow too comfortable in their wealth, more concerned with palace politics than battlefield readiness. Selim sees this and acts swiftly. You witness the purges unfold in Edirne's barracks. Officers dragged from their tents at dawn, stripped of rank, exiled, or executed. Loyalty is no longer enough. You must be ruthless, efficient, and absolutely obedient. Those who survive are hardened by fear, and fear makes them stronger. But Selim doesn't stop there. He knows that swords and armor alone won't win wars anymore. Gunpowder is changing the face of battle, and he intends to lead the charge. You walk through the imperial foundries in Constantinople, where blacksmiths and engineers work tirelessly to forge massive cannons, siege weapons capable of reducing stone walls to rubble. The Sultan invests heavily in artillery, bringing in the best minds from across his domain and beyond. Some are Christian defectors, men who once fought against the Ottomans, but now serve them for gold and protection. Their knowledge is invaluable. Selim also revamps the logistics of war. Supply lines must be swift, communication flawless. You see messengers riding day and night. Relay stations set up along major routes, so fresh horses are always available. Maps are redrawn, terrain studied in detail. No longer will campaigns stall due to poor planning or lack of provisions. Every soldier is trained not just to fight, but to march in perfect formation, to respond instantly to orders. Discipline becomes law. And then there's the navy. For centuries, the Ottomans have relied on coastal defenses and corsairs to control the seas. But Selim envisions something greater. You stand on the docks of Gallipoli as shipwrights construct sleek, fast galleys reinforced with bronze cannons. The Mediterranean is contested waters, dominated by Venice and Spain, but Selim isn't afraid of a fight. He recruits experienced sailors, bribes defectors from enemy fleets, and builds a naval base unlike anything seen before. By the time winter arrives, the Ottoman Empire isn't just an army, it's a machine. A well-oiled, unstoppable force ready to carve its name into history. And you feel it in your bones. This isn't just preparation for war, it's the beginning of conquest. You march with Selim's army as it sets its sights on Europe, where the great fortress of Belgrade stands defiant against Ottoman expansion. The year is 1521, and the city, perched at the confluence of the Danube and Sava rivers, is more than just a strategic stronghold. It is the gateway to Hungary, the key that will unlock Central Europe for the Sultan's ambitions. And you feel the weight of history pressing down on every soldier in the ranks as they trudge forward under the scorching summer sun. The campaign begins with brutal efficiency. You ride alongside the vanguard, watching as villages along the route are reduced to ash. Some surrender immediately, offering food and shelter to avoid destruction. Others resist and pay the price. The Janissaries move like shadows through the smoke, their disciplined formations slicing through resistance before vanishing into the dust again. This isn't just warfare, it's psychological terror. Selim doesn't want just to conquer, he wants to be feared. As the army approaches Belgrade, you see the fortress rising from the horizon like a stone giant. Its walls are thick, its towers bristling with defenders. The Hungarians have reinforced the city, stocking it with supplies and calling upon mercenaries from across Europe. They know what's coming. You can see it in their eyes when you pass by their outposts. Determination mixed with dread. Selim wastes no time. He deploys his artillery batteries, positioning massive bombards capable of hurling stones the size of a man's torso into the heart of the city. You stand beside the gunners as they light the fuses, feeling the ground tremble beneath your feet as fire and thunder erupt. The first volleys shake the very foundations of Belgrade. Stone splinters fly through the air, buildings crumble, and screams echo from within the walls. But the defenders hold firm. Night after night, you watch torches flicker along the ramparts as exhausted soldiers patch up breaches only to see them shattered again by morning. The siege becomes a war of attrition, and Selim knows he cannot afford delays. Supply lines stretch thin, and disease begins to creep through the camp. You feel the tension in the air, the impatience in the Sultan's voice when he addresses his commanders. Then comes the turning point. A traitor within the city, a disillusioned Hungarian officer, sends word to Selim, promising to open one of the gates in exchange for safety and gold. The Sultan agrees, and you join the secret force assembled for the midnight assault. Cloaked in darkness, you creep toward the designated gate, hearts pounding as you wait for the signal. When it comes, chaos erupts. The gate creaks open, and the Ottomans pour inside like a flood. The defenders, caught off guard, scramble to organize a defense, but it's too late. The battle spills into the streets, house to house, fighting breaking out in every alleyway. You duck behind a wall as arrows whiz past, then charge forward with the rest, cutting down any who resist. By dawn, the fortress flies the Ottoman banner. Belgrade belongs to Selim now, but this victory is only the beginning. As you stand atop the conquered walls, looking westward toward the distant spires of Vienna, you realize the Sultan's hunger for conquest has barely been satisfied. You stand on the shores of Rhodes, watching the Ottoman fleet stretch across the horizon like a black swarm descending upon the island. The year is 1522, and Selim's latest campaign has brought him here, to the last great stronghold of the Knights of St. John, an order of warrior monks who have defied empires for centuries. You've seen many sieges, but this one feels different. Rhodes isn't just another city. It's a fortress carved into rock, its walls reinforced by generations of battle-hardened defenders. The journey to Rhodes was long, your ship battered by storms and plagued by shortages. But now, as you step onto the sandy beach beneath the scorching sun, you see the full might of the Ottoman Empire assembled before you. Thousands of Janissaries line the shore, their banners fluttering in the sea breeze. Artillery wagons creak under the weight of massive bombards, while engineers scout the terrain, plotting where to place siege towers and tunnels beneath the walls. Selim doesn't waste time. He issues orders with cold precision, and within days, the Ottomans begin their relentless assault. You join the first wave of troops sent against the outer defenses, low stone bastions that protect the main city. Arrows rain down from above, and musket fire tears through the ranks. Some men fall screaming into the sand. Others press forward despite wounds, driven by fear of what awaits them if they retreat. Inside the city, the Knights of St. John prepare for war. You catch glimpses of them through the smoke, armored figures moving with grim determination, directing civilians to safety while reinforcing the walls. Their Grand Master, Philippe Villiers de l'Isle, stands at the heart of it all, rallying his men with fiery speeches and leading from the front. This is no ordinary enemy. These are warriors who have spent their lives preparing for sieges like this. As the days turn into weeks, the siege becomes a brutal test of endurance. The Ottomans dig trenches toward the walls, using earthworks to shield themselves from enemy fire. You crawl through the dirt alongside them, feeling the heat of cannon blasts shake the ground beneath you. Explosives are placed beneath key sections of the fortifications, and when the charges detonate, the sky lights up with fire and dust. But the defenders refuse to break. Every breach is met with fierce resistance. Every tower toppled only to be replaced by makeshift barricades. Disease spreads through both camps and supplies dwindle. You feel the exhaustion in your bones, the hunger gnawing at your gut. Yet Selim shows no sign of wavering. He rides along the lines, inspecting the progress himself, barking orders that send fresh waves of soldiers into the fray. Then comes the turning point. A tunnel collapses under the western wall, creating a massive gap in the defenses. Selim seizes the opportunity. At dawn, he launches a final, overwhelming assault. You charge with the rest, scaling the rubble-strewn ruins of the fortress, swords clashing in the morning light. Blood stains the stones red as the Ottomans pour into the city, cutting down anyone who resists. By nightfall, the Grand Master surrenders. The survivors are allowed safe passage off the island, but Rhodes belongs to the Sultan now. As you walk through the smoldering streets, stepping over the bodies of the fallen, you realize Selim has done what even mighty emperors failed to do. He has broken the unbreakable. And yet, as you look out over the sea, you know this victory is only another step in his relentless march westward. You sail with the Ottoman fleet as it carves a path through the Mediterranean, its banners snapping in the wind like the wings of a great predator. The conquest of Rhodes was only the beginning. Now, Selim intends to dominate the sea itself. For centuries, Christian powers have ruled these waters, their navies striking deep into Ottoman territory, raiding coastal cities and choking trade routes. But under Selim's command, that is about to change. The Sultan doesn't just want control, he wants supremacy. You stand on the deck of a newly reinforced galley, watching as shipwrights in Constantinople and Gallipoli work tirelessly to expand the empire's naval might. These aren't just ordinary vessels, they're war machines built for speed, firepower, and endurance. Massive bronze cannons line their decks, capable of reducing enemy ships to splinters with a single volley. Oarsmen row in perfect unison, their backs glistening with sweat beneath the relentless sun, while officers bark orders in a dozen languages: Turkish, Greek, Italian, Arabic, all blending into a symphony of maritime power. Selim understands that control of the sea means more than military dominance. It means economic leverage, political influence, and the ability to strike at Europe's heart from unexpected angles. And so he recruits the best minds money can buy. Some are former Venetian or Spanish sailors who defect for gold and protection. Others are corsairs, pirates who once plagued Ottoman shores, but now serve the Sultan in exchange for legitimacy and plunder. You ride alongside Hayreddin Barbarossa, the most feared admiral of the age, a veteran of countless battles. He commands not just fear, but respect. Under his leadership, the Ottoman navy becomes a force unlike any before it. You witness firsthand how he coordinates attacks with precision, using fast-moving squadrons to outmaneuver slower, heavier European fleets. He strikes where least expected, in the harbors of Sicily, along the coasts of Italy, even as far west as Spain's own shores. But Selim isn't content with hit-and-run raids. He wants to reshape the balance of power entirely. You watch as Ottoman forces capture key islands, turning them into fortified outposts that serve as both supply depots and forward bases. Tripoli falls first, then Algiers, followed by Tunis. Each victory extends the Sultan's reach, forcing European powers to divert resources away from land campaigns to defend their coastlines. Venice, long the dominant naval force in the eastern Mediterranean, watches in horror as its influence wanes. Trade routes, once controlled by Venetian merchants, now pass through Ottoman hands. Diplomats scramble to negotiate treaties, offering tribute and concessions in exchange for peace. Even the Pope begins to take notice. His warnings of an impending Islamic invasion grow louder with each passing year. Yet Selim knows that true mastery of the sea requires more than brute force. It requires strategy, intelligence, and alliances. You see him court the support of North African rulers, promising protection and shared prosperity in exchange for loyalty. He establishes a network of spies and informants across the Mediterranean, ensuring that no movement by his enemies goes unnoticed. As the years pass, the Ottoman navy becomes a symbol of imperial might. No longer does the Sultan rely solely on land conquests. His ambitions stretch beyond mountains and rivers, reaching across the waves themselves. And you, standing at the helm of this transformation, feel the weight of history shifting beneath your feet. The Mediterranean is no longer a battleground divided between rival Christian states. It is now an Ottoman lake, and the world will soon learn what that truly means. You ride with Selim's army as it surges into Hungary, the air thick with the scent of sweat, iron, and impending bloodshed. The year is 1526, and the Sultan has come to claim what he believes is his by right, dominion over Central Europe. You feel the weight of history pressing down on every soldier in the ranks as they march toward Mohács, where the fate of a kingdom will be decided in fire and steel. The campaign begins like all others, swift, ruthless, and absolute. You pass through burning villages, their wooden homes reduced to smoldering skeletons. Some settlements surrender without resistance, offering tribute and hostages to avoid destruction. Others fight and pay the price. The Janissaries move like shadows through the smoke, cutting down those who refuse to kneel. Fear precedes the Ottoman advance, spreading faster than any army ever could. As you approach the battlefield, you see the Hungarian forces assembling across the plains. King Louis II has gathered an army of noblemen, mercenaries, and peasant levies, but you can already tell they are outmatched before the first sword is drawn. Their cavalry is slow, weighed down by heavy armor, while the Ottomans have perfected mobility. Their infantry is disorganized, lacking the discipline of the Janissaries, and their artillery is outdated compared to the Sultan's monstrous bombards. Selim positions his forces with cold precision. You stand beside him on a slight rise, watching as the Ottoman lines stretch across the horizon. The Sultan doesn't waste time with speeches or dramatic gestures. He simply raises his hand and the battle begins. Cannon fire tears through the morning mist, shaking the ground beneath your feet. The first volleys rip into the Hungarian front lines, sending men and horses flying through the air. Smoke fills your lungs, stinging your eyes, but there's no time to cough. The charge is coming. Janissary musketeers unleash a relentless barrage, their disciplined formations firing in perfect unison. Arrows rain from the sky, striking down enemy soldiers before they even reach the Ottoman lines. Then comes the cavalry, the Sipahis, the Sultan's elite horsemen, thundering forward like a storm unleashed. You ride with them, feeling the rush of wind against your face as lances lower and swords flash in the sun. Chaos erupts on the battlefield. You slash through panicked defenders, ducking beneath wild swings of axes and maces. Blood sprays across your armor as bodies fall around you. The Hungarians try to hold their line, but it's futile. Their formation crumbles under the relentless pressure. Their leaders cut down one by one. King Louis himself flees the field, abandoning his men to their fate. He rides hard, desperate to escape, but the terrain betrays him. A sudden dip in the earth swallows his horse whole, throwing him into the mud. You watch as he scrambles to his feet, only to drown in a nearby stream, his heavy crown dragging him beneath the surface. By nightfall, the battle is over. The Ottoman banners fly high above the broken remnants of the Hungarian army. Thousands lie dead upon the field, their bodies littering the blood-soaked earth. Survivors scatter into the forests, pursued by merciless cavalry units sent to hunt them down. Mohács belongs to Selim now, and with it, Hungary itself. As you stand amidst the wreckage of war, you realize this victory is more than just another conquest. It is a statement. The Sultan has crossed the threshold into Europe, not as an invader, but as its rightful ruler. And you, standing at the heart of this empire in motion, know that the West still lies ahead, waiting for the next chapter of Selim's relentless march. You walk the halls of Topkapi Palace, where whispers travel faster than footsteps and every shadow hides a secret. The air is thick with incense and suspicion, and you feel it in your bones. This isn't just politics. This is war by other means. Selim's victories in Hungary have sent shockwaves through Europe, but his greatest threat doesn't come from Vienna or Rome. It comes from the East, from the man who has become his most dangerous rival, Shah Ismail II of Persia. The Safavid Empire is rising again, and this time, it's not just about territory, it's about faith. You've seen how religion fuels empires, how holy wars can be more devastating than any siege. Ismail claims divine right to rule, declaring himself the reincarnation of Ali, the rightful successor of the Prophet Muhammad. His followers, the Kizilbash warriors, don't just fight for him, they die for him, convinced that death in battle will grant them paradise. And now, they're rallying behind a new cause, driving the Ottomans out of Anatolia once and for all. Selim knows this isn't just another rebellion. He sees it in the reports brought to him at dawn, the growing number of defectors from Ottoman border garrisons, the sudden uprisings in eastern provinces, the secret messages intercepted between Persian envoys and disloyal nobles within his own court. Someone close to him is playing both sides. Someone who dines at his table and kneels in prayer beside him is feeding information to the enemy. You watch as the Sultan tightens his grip on the palace. No one enters or leaves without scrutiny. Servants are questioned under torchlight. Eunuchs patrol the corridors like silent ghosts, listening for even the faintest murmur of treason. Even the viziers tread carefully, knowing that a single misstep could see them dragged into the dungeons beneath the city. But Selim doesn't just rely on fear. He plays the game with precision. You stand beside him as he sends his own spies deep into Persian territory, men disguised as merchants, pilgrims, and even deserters seeking refuge in Ismail's court. They return with secrets, plans of invasion, names of conspirators, weaknesses in the Shah's inner circle. Some bring maps marked with hidden supply routes. Others carry poison, meant for hands willing to do what diplomacy cannot. The war begins not with swords, but with betrayal. In the city of Van, an Ottoman general loyal to Selim opens the gates to a contingent of disguised janissaries, allowing them to seize the fortress before the Safavids even realize what's happening. In Tabriz, a fire breaks out in the royal armory, destroying enough weapons to cripple an entire campaign. And in the mountains near Lake Ormia, a trusted advisor to the Shah is found dead, his throat slit by his own guards, who claim he was plotting to defect to the Ottomans. Ismail retaliates swiftly. He sends assassins into Ottoman territory, men trained to slip through cracks in walls and vanish into crowds. One nearly succeeds, slipping into a Edirne under the guise of a scribe and getting close enough to Selim to smell the musk of his robes before being caught. Another tries to infiltrate the harem, hoping to strike at the Sultan through his family. Both attempts end in bloodshed, their bodies displayed publicly as warnings to any who would dare conspire against the empire. As tensions escalate, the battlefield shifts from shadows to open war. Selim leads a massive campaign eastward, determined to crush the Safavid threat once and for all. You ride with him through the scorching plains of Anatolia, past burning villages and ruined fortresses. Every town you pass bears signs of the conflict. Graffiti scrawled on mosque walls calling for jihad. families fleeing into the hills, soldiers whispering prayers before each nightfall. Then comes the final confrontation. At the Battle of Konya, Selim's forces clash with the Kizilbash in a brutal, chaotic struggle. You fight alongside the Janissaries, feeling the weight of steel in your hand, hearing the screams of the dying echo across the field. The Safavids fight with religious fervor, throwing themselves at the Ottoman lines without hesitation. But Selim's army is better disciplined, better armed, and better led. By nightfall, the dust settles. The Shah's banners lie trampled in the mud, his surviving commanders captured or executed. Ismail disappears into exile, his dreams of conquest shattered. The war may not be over, but for now, the East belongs to Selim. And as you stand amidst the wreckage of yet another victory, you realize this was never just about Persia. It was about control, of borders, of faith, of power itself. And Selim has proven, once again, that no one challenges the Ottoman throne without paying the price. You stand at the edge of Vienna's towering walls, the cold wind slicing through your cloak as the first snowflakes of winter begin to fall. The year is 1529, and Selim's relentless march westward has brought him here, to the gates of Europe's most formidable stronghold. Vienna isn't just another city. It is the beating heart of the Holy Roman Empire, the last great barrier between the Ottoman advance and the riches of Central Europe. And you feel the weight of history pressing down on every soldier in the ranks as they prepare for what may be their greatest challenge yet. The campaign began with swift precision. You rode with the vanguard as they cut through the Hungarian countryside, securing supply lines and fortifying key positions along the Danube. Every village that resisted was burned. Every noble who refused to submit was executed. And by the time Selim reached the outskirts of Vienna, fear had already preceded his arrival. The city knew he was coming and had prepared. From your vantage point atop a nearby hill, you see the fortress rising like a stone colossus against the pale sky. Its walls are thick, reinforced with earthworks, and lined with defenders armed to the teeth. Cannon emplacements line the ramparts, their dark muzzles aimed toward the advancing Ottoman forces. Smoke rises from signal fires burning atop watchtowers, sending messages to distant allies that the siege has begun. Selim wastes no time. He deploys his artillery batteries, positioning massive bombards capable of hurling stones the size of a man's torso into the very foundations of the city. You stand beside the gunners as they load the monstrous weapons, feeling the ground tremble beneath your feet as fire and thunder erupt. The first volleys shake Vienna to its core, sending tremors through the streets below, but the walls hold firm. Inside the city, the defenders brace for the worst. You catch glimpses of them through the smoke. Mercenaries from across Europe, German knights in heavy armor, and local militiamen wielding whatever weapons they could scavenge. At their head stands Nicholas Grafsam, a veteran commander whose reputation for stubborn defense precedes him. He rallies his men with fiery speeches, reminding them that if Vienna falls, all of Europe will follow. But Selim is not a man to be denied. He orders his engineers to dig tunnels beneath the walls, filling them with explosives in hopes of collapsing the defenses from within. You descend into the damp earth alongside the miners, the sound of pickaxes echoing through the darkness. Sweat drips from your brow as you work tirelessly, knowing that failure means death, not just for you, but for thousands of soldiers waiting impatiently above. Days turn into weeks. The siege becomes a brutal test of endurance. Disease spreads through both camps and supplies dwindle. You feel the exhaustion in your bones, the hunger gnawing at your gut. Yet, Selim shows no sign of wavering. He rides along the lines, inspecting progress himself, barking orders that send fresh waves of soldiers into the fray. Then comes the turning point. A tunnel collapses under the northern wall, creating a massive breach in the defenses. Selim seizes the opportunity. At dawn, he launches a final, overwhelming assault. You charge with the rest, scaling the rubble-strewn ruins of the fortress, swords clashing in the morning light. Blood stains the stones red as the Ottomans pour into the city, cutting down anyone who resists. But Vienna does not fall so easily. Despite the breach, the defenders regroup, reinforcing the inner lines with desperate determination. The fighting spills into the narrow streets, house to house combat breaking out in every alleyway. You duck behind a wall as arrows whiz past, then charge forward with the rest, only to find yourself locked in brutal melee with a German knight whose sword clashes against your own. As night falls, the battle rages on. The city is half burned, its streets littered with the dead and dying. But still Vienna stands, and Selim knows that time is slipping away. Winter is coming, and with it, the threat of disease, starvation, and the possibility of reinforcements arriving from the east. He cannot afford to wait any longer. Reluctantly, he gives the order to retreat. The Ottoman banners are pulled from the ruined walls, and the army begins its slow withdrawal back across the frozen plains. You trudge through the snow, looking over your shoulder one last time at the city that defied the Sultan's might. Vienna remains unconquered, but Selim has sent a message, one that will echo through the halls of Europe for generations to come. The Ottoman Empire has arrived at the doorstep of the West, and it will not stop until it claims what it believes is rightfully its own. You walk the halls of Topkapi Palace, where the air feels heavier than it used to, thicker with secrets, more brittle with tension. The scent of incense still lingers in the corridors, but now it mixes with something else, decay. Not the kind that comes from rot or disease, but the slow, creeping rot of power left too long in one man's hands. Selim has returned from Vienna, yes, but not as a conqueror, as a ruler nursing wounds both physical and political. He rides through the streets of Constantinople beneath banners that still proclaim his greatness, but you can feel the shift in the city. Murmurs follow him like shadows. In the bazaars, merchants speak in hushed tones about how even the walls of Europe have resisted him now. In the mosques, imams pray for divine favor, while subtly questioning whether the Sultan's ambitions have grown too bold, too reckless. And you? You feel it in your bones. This is different. Before, Selim ruled with fire in his eyes, with the certainty of a man who had never tasted defeat. Now, there's something else behind his gaze, a flicker of doubt, buried deep but unmistakable. It isn't just the failure at Vienna gnawing at him. It's everything that came after. The treasury is bleeding dry. You stand beside the viziers as they pore over ledgers stained with ink and worry. The campaigns in Hungary, Rhodes, Persia, and now Austria, they've all come at a cost. Grain prices rise in the markets. Taxes tighten their grip on the backs of farmers and merchants alike. And when money runs low, corruption finds fertile ground. You see it in the palace kitchens, where food meant for the Sultan's table disappears before it reaches the dining hall. You hear it in the barracks, where Janissary officers pocket silver meant for supplies. Even in the navy, once the pride of the empire, ships sit idle in the harbors, their hulls rotting because no one dares report the shortages to the Sultan himself. Selim senses it too. He begins purging again, not just enemies, but anyone he suspects of disloyalty. Ministers vanish overnight. Governors are recalled under false pretenses and never seen again. Some say the dungeons beneath the palace are fuller than ever, but fear alone cannot hold an empire together. Then comes the betrayal that cuts deepest. A letter intercepted by palace spies reveals a plot within the royal family itself. One of Selim's own sons, Mustafa, is being whispered about as a potential replacement. Younger, less bloodied by war, more willing to listen to the voices calling for peace. You read the names listed in the letter: high-ranking generals, trusted advisors, even members of the harem, all conspiring in secret. Selim does not hesitate. He orders arrests immediately. You watch as men who once dined at his table are dragged away in chains. Some beg for mercy. Others curse his name until the last breath leaves their bodies. But Mustafa, he does not run. He stands tall when confronted, looking his father in the eye as if daring him to act. And Selim does. Mustafa is executed in the dead of night, his body buried without ceremony. No one speaks of it aloud, but the weight of that decision settles over the court like a funeral shroud. Even the Janissaries, hardened as they are, murmur among themselves. A ruler who kills his own son is no longer just ruthless. He is desperate. You see it in Selim's face in the days that follow. He grows colder, more withdrawn. He spends hours staring out over the Bosphorus, watching the ships sail past, wondering perhaps what lies beyond them. Or maybe he's just counting the ghosts. Because now, more than ever, you understand the Sultan who ruled 3 continents is beginning to lose control of the one thing that matters most: himself. You ride through the Anatolian countryside as the first signs of rebellion begin to bloom, like dark flowers across the empire. The year is 1532, and though Selim still sits on the throne, the cracks in his rule are spreading faster than he can patch them. You feel it in the air, the tension that comes before a storm, the kind that turns empires inside out. It starts in the east. The Kizilbash, once crushed after the Battle of Konya, rise again under a new leader, Shahtamasp, Ismail's son, who has learned from his father's mistakes. He doesn't seek open battle this time. Instead, he wages war with fire and shadow, burning supply depots, ambushing messengers, and rallying tribes that have long resented Ottoman rule. You see their banners flying over villages that once paid tribute to Constantinople. Hear their war chants echo through the mountains. And you know, Selim underestimated them. But it isn't just Persia stirring against him. In the west, Hungary fractures. Though Selim claimed victory at Mohács, not all nobles accept Ottoman rule. Some rally behind rival claimants to the throne. Others turn to Vienna for support. You stand in secret meetings where Hungarian lords whisper about rebellion, plotting how to drive the Ottomans back across the Danube. One even offers you gold if you'll carry messages to the Habsburg court, a tempting offer, until you remember what happened to Mustafa. And then there's the Janissaries. Once the Sultan's most loyal soldiers, now they grow restless. You walk among them in the barracks of Edirne, hearing their complaints over dwindling pay, unfulfilled promises, and the growing corruption within their own ranks. Officers line their pockets, while recruits go hungry. Discipline falters, orders are questioned, and when Selim demands another campaign to crush the Safavids, some refuse to march. You see the Sultan's frustration mount with every passing day. He issues decrees demanding obedience, but they are ignored or twisted by local governors who now act more like independent rulers than servants of the empire. You watch as he tightens his grip on the palace, ordering spies to report on anyone suspected of disloyalty. But fear alone cannot hold an empire together. Then comes the worst betrayal of all. A governor in Anatolia declares independence, not openly but subtly at first, refusing to send taxes, ignoring imperial orders, fortifying his city against potential intervention. When Selim sends envoys to demand submission, they return with severed heads. The Sultan does not hesitate. He gathers his forces and marches eastward, determined to crush the rebellion himself. You ride with him, feeling the weight of history pressing down on both sides. This is no longer just a military campaign. It is a test of his very authority. If he fails here, the floodgates will open. Every vassal, every noble, every ambitious general will see weakness and strike. As you approach the rebel stronghold, you see the enemy waiting beyond the walls. Mercenaries from Persia, defected Ottoman troops, and local militiamen emboldened by their defiance. They do not flee at the sight of the Sultan's banners. They stand firm. Selim gives the order to attack. The Janissaries charge forward, but something feels different this time. Their formations lack precision. Some hesitate before engaging. And when the rebels launch a surprise counterattack, breaking through the left flank, panic spreads. You fight alongside the front lines, slashing through enemies, trying to hold the line. But you see it happening, the moment when loyalty begins to crack. Some soldiers break rank, fleeing toward the hills. Others simply drop their weapons and surrender. By nightfall, the battle is lost. Not decisively, but enough. The city remains in rebel hands. Selim withdraws, his army battered and demoralized. And as you look at the retreating columns, you realize something chilling. The Sultan who ruled 3 continents is no longer feared by those closest to him. And when fear fades, so does power. You ride with Selim one last time, the wind sharp against your face as the Ottoman banners flap like weary ghosts above you. The year is 1536, and though his empire still stretches across 3 continents, the fire in his eyes has dimmed. He rides at the head of his army, not with the confidence of a conqueror, but with the burden of a man chasing a dream that slips further away with every passing mile. This campaign westward is different from all the others. There are no grand speeches before battle, no triumphant declarations carved into the walls of conquered cities. You see it in the way his soldiers move, hesitant, uncertain, worn down by years of war and whispers of rebellion. The Janissaries still march in formation, but their discipline feels brittle, like glass waiting to shatter. Even the cannons, once the great instruments of his dominance, seem heavier now, dragging behind the army like relics of a fading era. The Sultan's final campaigns begin in Hungary, where he hopes to tighten his grip on the fractured kingdom before turning his attention back to Persia. But nothing goes as planned. You stand beside him in council meetings where generals argue over strategy, where viziers whisper about dwindling supplies and rising debts. Every decision feels like a gamble, and for the first time, Selim isn't sure whether he'll win. He leads his forces toward Buda, determined to crush the last remnants of resistance. You fight alongside the Janissaries as they storm the city gates, cutting through defenders who refuse to surrender. But victory feels hollow this time. When the smoke clears, you find yourself standing amidst the ruins of what was once a thriving capital. Fires still burn in the streets, and the air smells of blood and ash. And yet, as you look around, you realize something chilling. There's no celebration, no cheers, just exhaustion. Selim pushes forward, marching deeper into Hungarian territory, hoping to prove that his empire still commands fear. But the enemy has learned from past defeats. They avoid open battles, instead striking at supply lines, ambushing patrols, vanishing into the forests before reinforcements can arrive. You feel the frustration building in the ranks. Soldiers grow restless, some desert under cover of darkness, slipping away into villages where they trade their weapons for food and shelter. Then comes the betrayal that wounds him most. One of his own commanders, Kara Ahmed Pasha, a man who once stood at his right hand, sends secret messages to Vienna offering negotiations in exchange for land and protection. When the letters are intercepted, Selim does not hesitate. Kara Ahmed is executed in silence, his body left hanging at the city gates as a warning to any who would follow him. But even death cannot stop what is coming. As winter sets in, the campaign grinds to a halt. Snow blankets the countryside, freezing supply wagons in place, slowing the movement of men and beasts alike. Disease spreads through the camps, and you watch as soldiers fall ill overnight, coughing blood into the cold air before succumbing to fever. Selim refuses to retreat. He orders fires to be built, prayers to be said, more men to be conscripted. But deep down, even he knows the truth. His empire is no longer unstoppable, and neither is he. By spring, the campaign ends without glory. Treaties are signed, alliances shifted, but nothing is truly won. You ride back toward Constantinople, watching the Sultan's back grow straighter with each passing day, as if trying to convince himself that he still commands the world. But you know better, because you've seen it, the slow unraveling of an empire forged in fire, now burning itself out. You walk through the streets of Constantinople, and for the first time in years, you feel something unfamiliar, uncertainty. The city still bustles with merchants, sailors, and scholars, but beneath the surface, The cracks are spreading. You see it in the way people talk in hushed voices at the market stalls, in the way soldiers hesitate before saluting their officers, in the way even the palace servants move more carefully, as if afraid to draw attention. Selim is still the Sultan, still seated on his throne, still commanding armies that stretch across 3 continents. But power is more than just banners and battles. It's belief. And belief, once shaken, is hard to restore. The empire stumbles under its own weight. Trade routes that once fed the capital now struggle under the strain of piracy and rebellion. Grain shipments from Egypt arrive late or not at all. Inflation climbs, and with it, unrest. You pass by a group of starving farmers begging outside the mosque gates, their faces gaunt, their hands outstretched. Some whisper prayers for divine mercy. Others mutter curses against the Sultan. In the palace, Selim tries to maintain control, but even his closest advisors are divided. You sit in on council meetings where viziers argue over how to handle the growing crises. Some call for harsher taxes to fund new campaigns. Others warn that squeezing the people too hard will spark revolt. There is no easy answer. Every solution feels like a gamble, and Selim, once so sure of himself, hesitates before making decisions. Then come the revolts. It starts in Anatolia, where local governors, emboldened by past rebellions, begin ignoring imperial decrees. Some declare themselves independent rulers. Others send envoys to Persia, offering alliances in exchange for protection. You ride with a detachment sent to restore order, only to find entire towns welcoming Ottoman deserters who promise them freedom from the Sultan's rule. And then there's Hungary. What was once a conquered kingdom now feels more like an open wound. Nobles who swore fealty to Selim now look westward, seeking aid from Vienna. Border fortresses fall one by one, not to foreign invaders, but to local uprisings. You stand atop the walls of Pest as a mob storms the gates, armed with pitchforks and stolen swords, shouting for liberation. Even within the Janissaries, the once unbreakable elite corps, discipline begins to fray. You hear rumors of secret meetings held in the barracks, of soldiers refusing orders unless promised higher pay. When a commander tries to enforce discipline, he is found dead in his quarters. Throat slit, no witnesses. Selim responds with force, as he always has. He sends armies east and west, crushing rebellions wherever they rise. You fight alongside his forces in the hills of Anatolia, watching as villages burn, as leaders are executed in public squares. But this time the terror doesn't last. People don't scatter in fear. They return, again and again, determined to resist. And you realize something chilling. Fear alone cannot hold an empire together anymore. As winter sets in, the Sultan withdraws into the palace, rarely seen in public. Rumors spread. Some say he is ill. Others claim he has lost his mind. You hear whispers of courtiers discussing succession, of generals weighing which prince might be easier to control. But Selim is not finished yet. He calls for one final campaign, insisting that victory will restore what has been lost. You watch as he gathers what remains of his loyal forces, preparing to march once more toward the west. His eyes still burn with fire, though it flickers now uncertain. Because deep down you know the truth. The empire is no longer his to command. It is slipping through his fingers like sand in the wind. You walk through the ruins of what was once the heart of Selim's empire, stepping over broken columns and shattered mosaics that whisper of a grandeur now lost. The streets of Constantinople still bustle, but beneath the surface, decay festers. You see it in the way merchants haggle more desperately for every coin, in the way beggars crowd the mosque steps, in the way soldiers no longer march with pride but shuffle with exhaustion. Selim is gone now, dead in 1536, though his name still lingers like an echo in the palace halls. His son Suleiman has taken the throne, a ruler who will one day be called the Magnificent. But you know better than to believe that a new sultan can undo what time and ambition have already set into motion. The empire he inherits is not the same one that stretched across 3 continents under Selim's rule. It is fraying at the edges, its foundations cracked by years of relentless war, internal strife, and the weight of too many promises left unfulfilled. You ride with the Janissaries as they struggle to maintain control over the provinces. Some still fight with the discipline that once made them feared across Europe and Asia, but others have become mercenaries in all but name, demanding higher pay, refusing orders unless bribed, even turning on their own commanders when demands go unmet. You witness a mutiny in Anatolia, where a group of soldiers storms a governor's palace, looting treasures meant for the imperial treasury before vanishing into the mountains. The navy, once the terror of the Mediterranean, grows weaker with each passing year. Venetian and Spanish ships reclaim the seas, cutting off vital trade routes. Corsairs who once served the Sultan now operate independently, raiding Ottoman ports as often as foreign ones. You stand on the docks of Gallipoli, watching as rusting galleys sit idle, their sails torn, their crews dwindling. In the east, the Safavids rise again, emboldened by the empire's decline. Shah Tahmasp seizes border territories with little resistance, knowing full well that the Ottomans lack the strength to push back. You travel with envoys sent to negotiate peace, only to return empty-handed. The Persians demand concessions that would weaken the empire further, and yet refusal means another war that cannot be won. And then there is Hungary. What was once a conquest now feels like an open wound, bleeding resources and manpower with no end in sight. Nobles who swore fealty to Selim now serve Vienna instead, offering their swords to the Habsburgs in exchange for protection. You stand atop the walls of Buda as Austrian banners flutter above the city, a sight that would have been unthinkable just a decade ago. Even within the palace, power struggles consume what remains of stability. Viziers plot against viziers, eunuchs whisper secrets in the harem, and princes jockey for position, knowing that the throne changes hands not through peaceful succession, but through bloodshed. You watch as alliances form and break overnight, as poison finds its way into wine cups more often than steel into enemy hearts. But perhaps the greatest sign of decline lies not in battles lost or treaties broken. It lies in the people. Farmers abandon their fields, unable to survive the taxes imposed by a crumbling state. Merchants flee to Venice or Genoa, seeking safer harbors for their goods. And in the mosques, imams speak of divine punishment, questioning whether the empire has strayed too far from the path of righteousness. As you look out over the city from the heights of Topkapi Palace, you realize something chilling. Empires do not fall in a single battle. They collapse slowly, piece by piece, until nothing remains but echoes of what once was. Selim's legacy is not gone. It lingers in the architecture, in the laws, in the very idea of what the Ottoman Empire could be. But the reality is undeniable. The Golden Age has passed, and the long descent has begun. You stand at the edge of time, looking back over the vast expanse of Selim's reign. The battles fought, the cities conquered, the empire that once stretched across 3 continents. You've ridden with him through fire and blood, seen him rise from a prince forged in betrayal to a sultan who reshaped the world. And now, as the dust settles on his legacy, you feel the weight of history pressing down like never before. Selim was not just a ruler, he was a force of nature. He didn't inherit an empire. He seized it, rebuilt it, and expanded it until its banners flew from the gates of Vienna to the deserts of Arabia. He commanded fear where diplomacy failed, crushed rebellion before it could take root, and reshaped the balance of power in ways that still echo today. You saw it all unfold. The siege of Belgrade, the fall of Rhodes, the thunderous charge at Mohács, the long, bitter struggle for Vienna. Every victory carved his name deeper into history. Every campaign etched his ambition into stone. But empires are not built on conquest alone. They are sustained by belief, by order, by the delicate balance between strength and stability. And here, in the twilight of Selim's rule, you see where even the greatest rulers falter. He pushed too far, too fast, demanding more from his people, his army, and himself than any man could sustain. The Janissaries, once his most loyal soldiers, became mercenaries in all but name. The provinces, once bound to the throne by fear, began to slip away. And within the palace walls, whispers of doubt turned into open defiance. Yet, despite all this, Selim's impact cannot be denied. He transformed the Ottoman military into a machine unlike anything Europe had seen before, revolutionizing artillery, naval warfare, and logistics in ways that would influence centuries of future conflicts. He reshaped the Mediterranean into an Ottoman lake, forcing European powers to rethink their dominance at sea. He challenged the Pope's authority, defied the Habsburgs, and stood toe-to-toe with the Safavids in a battle not just for land, but for faith itself. And perhaps most importantly, he proved that power is not just about armies or borders, it is about perception. For decades, the mere mention of his name was enough to send shivers down the spines of kings and emperors alike. He ruled not just with swords and cannons, but with fear, with strategy, with an unrelenting will to shape the world in his image. Now, standing at the end of this journey, you wonder, how does history remember him? Some call him ruthless, a tyrant who slaughtered his own brothers to claim the throne. Others hail him as a visionary, a ruler who saw the future and forced the world to bend to his will. But the truth, as always, lies somewhere in between. Selim was neither monster nor saint. He was a man shaped by the brutal realities of his time, driven by an insatiable hunger for control. You think back to the moment you first met him in Edirne, when he rode into the city fresh from exile, blood still staining his robes from the executions that secured his place on the throne. You watched him grow from a prince desperate to prove himself into a sultan who dared to challenge the very foundations of Europe's power structure. And in the end, you watched as the weight of his own ambitions began to crush him. Because that is the curse of greatness. The same fire that propels a man to conquer the world can also consume him from within. So what remains? Not just the ruins of castles or the faded banners of fallen armies, but the idea of what Selim represented. A ruler who refused to accept limits, who believed that destiny could be seized rather than waited for. An empire that, for a brief and shining moment, seemed truly unstoppable. And yet, as you look out over the crumbling fortresses and shifting alliances of the years that followed his death, you understand one final truth. No empire lasts forever. Even the mightiest thrones crumble. Even the fiercest flames burn out. And even the greatest rulers fade into legend. So tell me, what do you think? Was Selim a tyrant, a genius, or something else entirely? Drop a comment below with your thoughts. Wherever you're watching from, whether you're in Istanbul, Vienna, or halfway across the world, I'd love to hear your take on this man who once held 3 continents in his grip. Because history doesn't just belong to those who lived it. It belongs to all of us who remember.